So I'm not entirely sure why they decided to remake the original or go in the direction that they decided to go in. But here is my review of The Wicker Man. Both of them. I have many thoughts about the first movie. I think it's a really fascinating look at religion from vastly different perspectives and digs into the Christian discomfort with sex and those different from themselves. Then there's the remake, and I'm a little concerned about those that were involved with writing and creating that movie. And it's not like I need a shot-by-shot remake. I do like when someone tries something different. Trying something new with a remake can really work in your favor. I'm thinking of Child's Play, and I know we don't like it because they kind of went behind the Don Mancini's back to make it. And I did like Evil Dead, both taking the original plot but changing it enough that it's a new story. But this remake is so drastically changing the original plot that it's almost incomprehensible. It's kind of fascinating, and I will admit, it's entertaining. Bees. The Wicker Man was released in 1973, and it is a very British movie. This movie was directed by Robin Hardy and written by Anthony Shaffer. The stars are Edward Woodward, Britt Ekland, and Christopher Lee. I will take this moment to say that Lee is one of the coolest dudes that I've ever read about, and he never got paid for this movie. At the time, this movie had some success and was apparently called the Citizen Kane of horror. And you know what? That's fair. It's a good movie, so honestly, it works. The events take place on a small island off the coast of Scotland, and our main character, Neil Howie, is a police officer that has arrived after receiving a letter that tells him of a missing girl. Flying a plane to the island was pretty much the only way to get there. They aren't exactly the most welcoming group of people and have largely cut themselves off from the rest of the world. No one is allowed to come onto the island without the explicit permission of Lord Summersisle. We learn later that the Lord's father had founded the island and set up the commune, and he is regarded as an important religious figure to the people. He's always spoken about by the people Neil talks to, but we don't actually meet him until the second half of the movie. Everyone that Neil talks to is unwilling to admit that they had ever seen the child. The little girl's name is Rowan, and her mother truly doesn't seem that bothered by her disappearance. A little girl that he speaks to says that Rowan is an hare, an animal that the people of Summer Isle associate with Rowan. To Neil and us, we believe that her association with the rabbit has something to do with Rowan being a prey to the cult. He doesn't realize that he is the actual prey in this situation because he is so focused on her safety. There is an inn that Neil can stay in during his stay, so at least he's housed. The inn is owned by Elder McGregor, and he lives with his daughter. If Neil wasn't already super uncomfortable about being on the island without any backup, the entire bar singing about sleeping with the innkeeper's daughter definitely did this. While he's at the inn, he sees a bunch of pictures with young girls dressed up and surrounded by fruits and vegetables, but he notices that one of the photos is missing, and it seems as though it came from the previous year. Neil decides that's enough of being conscious and goes upstairs to get ready for bed. When he looks out the window, he sees many of the citizens having sex in public and hanging out while naked. There's then this weird music video where the landlord's daughter naked and banging up against the walls while singing. Something that is making Neil uncomfortable while obviously also very interested in what is going on next door. Temptation and all that. Everyone is just a little bit too free and happy for his taste. Neil knows that if he's going to try and find a child, a good place to start looking is a school. Neil walks into the schoolhouse while the teacher is talking about the maypole and talking to the students about the idea of it being a phallic symbol. Not really something that Neil thought he would be walking in on, and he gets very offended that she's discussing something like that in front of the children. So he starts talking about degeneracy. I will say that he might have a point when he opens up an empty desk to reveal a beetle that has been tied to a nail, forcing it to go around and around in circles. But he's also stomping over any rights that they have when he tries to find the ledger with the information about the students. Despite the students claiming that they didn't know Rowan, her name is in the ledger. The teacher gets frustrated with him when he starts to yell at them for not being honest. She takes him outside and explains that they view death differently, mostly that they don't use that word. So, when they're talking about Rowan not existing, that's what they're actually trying to express. She also directs him towards the cemetery, which is where Rowan is. The grounds aren't sacred, although it is located near where an old church used to be. Neil is not happy about it, throwing a little fit that involves him making a cross with some broken pieces of wood. Thankfully, his presence in the graveyard brings out the man that cares for the area, and he's fine with saying that Rowan passed away 6 or 7 months ago. What does gross Neil out is finding her umbilical cord hanging on the tree that was planted over Rowan's resting place. I'm just kind of surprised it lasted that long. But we do finally get to meet Lord Summersisle, and he's someone that's very used to sort of dealing with the criticism that Neil is coming up with. He's very well versed in his religion, but also Christianity. It also becomes clear to us that he's very clearly someone that genuinely believes in the religion. There's no moment where you feel as though he is being dishonest and just trying to manipulate the people that he's in charge of. While the Lord is trying to explain his own religion, Neil can't help but get offended and start shoving his religion down Lord Summerisle's throat. It's not something that the Lord is willing to listen to, and he's much smoother when talking about religion. Like, he's just smarter about this than Neil. Regardless, Neil gets the consent to exhume Rowan's body, which is something that he's more than happy to do for someone that's so religious. But when he does open the coffin, he just finds a hair inside. He gets frustrated, and this is just giving him more questions. If she's dead, where is her body? So he does what he probably should have done a while ago, which was research the religion that he's dealing with, to find out why Rowan isn't in the coffin that she should be in and what that means. And he finds the picture of Rowan, and it turns out that she had been the May Queen the previous year. There was nowhere near as many fruit and vegetables that were in the other pictures. His original assumption is that she had been killed because they didn't get a good return, that they blamed her for it. He does more research and discovers that she might not actually be dead yet. It's a little disorienting trying to follow the information that he unveils, but you are inclined to believe and understand where Neil is coming from because he is Christian. The average viewer is meant to sympathize with him, so when he makes discoveries, you are more willing to take his word and believe that he is right. Neil believes that they are actually going to be killing her the following day during the celebrations, which means that he still does have enough time to save Rowan, not just from the death, but also from the cult. The May Day celebration involves a lot of people dressing up in animal masks. They're popping up behind the walls to watch him as he gets ready to head back to the mainland. He's planning on getting this all shut down before Rowan can be killed, but when he gets to the plane, it has been tampered with enough that he can't leave. He returns to the inn frustrated and goes to lay down upstairs. While he's resting, he overhears the landlord and the landlord's daughter discussing drugging him so that he wouldn't be awake for days. This is a red herring to get him up and out of the inn, which certainly works, especially when we see a hand candle that has been placed by the side of the bed. The only choice he really has is to get to the celebrations, is to knock out the landlord and wear his costume, which is of course the fool. Neil does try to play the fool, but he's not very good at it. It involves a lot of dancing, and they are heading to the mini Stonehenge, which is a really cool set piece. There is a tense moment where they have to each put their head in the circle of swords, teasing as though they are going to cut off someone's head. Neil is very nervous, but they don't chop his head off now. They chop the head off an animal costume, and everything seems fine. They're at the edge of the cliff and offering ale to the gods when Neil finally finds Rowan. He tries to rescue her, following her in an attempt to run away from the cult, but instead, Rowan leads him towards where he needs to be. That is why he needs to go to the part of the island on his own volition. Rowan is congratulated by the Lord for doing her duty. This is when everything is revealed to us. It is true that Rowan was the May Queen of the previous year and that things didn't go as well as everyone hoped. Neil points out that this is because the island isn't an ideal place to grow things, which is the first time in the entire movie that he sounded like a competent adult. He's wrong, though, because the island has been prosperous, and that's obvious by the photos that he'd seen at the inn. To the cult, an adult sacrifice are the best kind of sacrifice. Animals are acceptable, children are passable, but neither will beat the experience and the life that has been lit on an adult. When Neil is facing his death vessel, he starts to freak out. It is an enormous man that is made out of sticks with animals in various parts of the body. It is clear that his spot is going to be right in the center of the Wicker Man. He proclaims his love for Jesus, and no one seems bothered with his religious desperation. Lord Summerisle even says that he would be giving a martyr's death. The cult starts to sing and dance as the fire is lit. Animals start screaming in pain as they are burnt. In an attempt to drown out the song of the heathens, Neil starts to sing his choir songs. 10. This movie is smart, which is why sometimes I get frustrated thinking about the sequel, because it's not smart. But this movie put in a lot of thought, put in a lot of effort to make this story. Even though it's never explicitly stated in the Bible, it has largely been portrayed as the forbidden fruit is an apple. The forbidden fruit is all about the knowledge that had been kept from the humans. In this situation, everyone else on the island has this knowledge, and Neil spends the entire movie trying to get his hands on an apple. Not just the knowledge, but the man legitimately couldn't get an apple. This movie is smart, which is why the remake is so In 2006, for reasons that are still not clear to me, they decided to remake the original, starring Nicolas Cage, who was known for his subtle, intelligent acting. This movie was written and directed by Neil LaBute, and has done quite a few things, but I haven't really seen anything he's done. It stars Nick Cage, Ellen Burstyn, and Frances Conroy. Ellen is most known for The Exorcist. Frances Conroy is most known for American Horror Story. Trigger warning for misogyny. Okay, so I do kind of wonder if Neil LaBute was going through a divorce at the time of writing this movie, because oh my god, this movie is so bitter. It's not smart. It's quite literally spelled out at every twist and turn of this movie, and it's all bad. The movie opens with Edward trying to rescue this little doll that had been thrown out of the window by a little girl, which she then throws it out the window again, which is probably a part of the theme of this movie, but Edward goes to retrieve the doll, and in that period of time, the car that the little girl had been in gets creamed by a truck. He isn't able to save the little girl and is in a bit of a depression the next time that we catch up to him. A female cop had brought some letters that had been sent to the station for him, including one from Edward's ex-fiancée. She had disappeared from his life suddenly. In this letter, she is asking him for help as her daughter has gone missing. She doesn't know what she's going to do and is desperate for help. The little girl's mother, and the cop are all going to be revealed as part of the cult on the island. The first time I saw this, I didn't get it, but they are definitely on the island in the cult when he is being Wicker Manned. So we're already starting off with an overcomplicated plot. In the original, Neil just got a letter and showed up to investigate. Now we've added so many useless layers. The Summers Isle of this movie is a farming community on an island whose major export is honey. I mentioned at the end of the last section that it was the apple linked to knowledge in that one. I think that the fact that the major export is honey is obvious. The idea of the queen bee running all the drones around isn't exactly subtle. While Edward is trying to get the missing picture, he meets the town's photographer, who is also the town's physician. It is revealed to us early that Edward is allergic to bees, which only makes the metaphor a little bit funnier. When he is at the inn, he finds the pictures and sees one that is missing. In this instance, this has been proved to be a very, very, very long practice. There are 3 rows of mini girls on this big-ass wall. So, to try and get more information about Rowan, he goes to the school. There are no boys in the classroom, and the girls are all repeating after the teacher and saying phallic symbol. Edward is a lot more confused about this and laughs, shocked that they are discussing such a thing at the school. When he checks the empty desk, a crow flies away, which, while cruel, just doesn't seem as bad as the bug. The teacher talks to him and says she'll burn to death. He hears her right, but she acts as though she said that Rowan had burned to death. It's not much of a surprise to the viewer that Edward is Rowan's father. I'm running on the assumption that this is true. We don't have any reason to believe that Rowan is not his child, but there's never any relationship, and he was already hunting for this child pretty hard. It didn't add much to the narrative other than the audience being made aware of it. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but there are so many moments in this movie that are just lazy. There's a dream sequence within a dream sequence, which is almost like the kiss of death. They just weren't creative enough to have something happen in this movie. He ends up having a bit of an allergic reaction due to the bees, but it does lead him to meeting Sister Summersisle, who tells him that he has some rough potential. So we get the story of the cult. They have a link to Salem, because of course they do. It's not as though these are people that believe in the paganism of the witch kind. The sister's great-great-grandmother had led them to the island eventually, after the community had been pushed west over the years. I kind of feel as though there should have been more greats in front of that, but it's as good as we're going to get. What Edward really takes from the story is that the women are simply not subservient to men, but the movie shows us that the men are treated as second-class citizens. It's essentially the opposite of what historically has happened. The entire movie is based on the idea that if women were the dominant gender in society, they would do worse to men than what men have done to women, which is, frankly, a bold claim to be making. There is an underground mausoleum that had been brought up previously, and when Edward is in the graveyard, he hears Rowan down there. So he immediately goes down there. He immediately goes down and ends up being trapped inside due to the rising water levels. He's only able to yell for help into the void of the night. And as much as I might enjoy Nick Cage and appreciate some of the movies he's been in, he did terrible in this movie. I didn't even get the version that had the bees line because at least that's entertaining. From this point on, he's completely unhinged, which doesn't really work with the rest of the cast. He tells Willow to go home and lock her doors because he knows that something bad is about to happen. The first spot that he goes to is Sister Summerisle's home. He walks in on a man that is covered in large welts, we're assuming from the bees, and the next room he enters has a naked woman covered in bees. He freaks out and ends up taking off, skipping the room where Sister Summerisle is lounging while surrounded by women in white, just to make the point of her being the queen bee that much more obvious to the viewer. When Edward goes to the bar, the men that are there are unwilling to help him, and it also seems as though they are unable to help him or speak. He kind of talks to them and they kind of grunt in response. The only way that Edward can get to the ceremony is by dressing himself up. He rocks the shit out of the innkeeper and steals her costume, which is a giant bear suit, which doesn't really work as well as the Fool, but he does eventually find Rowan, who is being tied to the trunk of a tree. There isn't any subtlety in what he does as he's running around in a fursuit and punching people, but he does get his hands on Rowan. Once again, she leads him to the group and is revealed to him that this has all been a performance to get him to do what they wanted him to do. In this movie, they really spell everything out for the viewer. The writer of this movie did not believe that we were smart enough to figure out a single thing in the entire running time of this movie. There's also when we see the female cop, the girl from the car, and the girl's mother watching them. It was such a pointless plot. Edward is tortured and... Okay, I didn't get the bees scene, which is, admittedly, one of the better parts of the movie. In this movie, Rowan is the one that runs forward to start the fire, which I do think is a nice touch, but to add insult to injury, he gets called a drone in the process. The movie ends with Willow and a minor character that was meant to be our landlord's daughter at the bar. They're picking up James Franco so that in a few years they can continue this cycle over and over again. 18. It goes without saying that the 70s version is just a better movie. There's no beating around the bush on that one. It's a better movie, it's smarter, it's better well crafted, it's better well acted. Christopher Lee is just phenomenal in it as this character. And no shade to Ellen Burstyn, she's absolutely doing the best that she can with what she's been given, but she hasn't been given a lot. And I feel as though she probably took this role knowing Christopher Lee's role, and I can't imagine how disappointed she must have been in this movie. The 70s version forces the viewer to question the religion, question who can be trusted, and brings up the constant fear of others in our world. Christopher Lee really played this character that's fantastic and expertly counters the religious words of the police officer. Then the remake is about how women would subject men to the horrors that men have subjected women to, and men just don't deserve that because women are evil. Yeah, the second one's real bad. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Amanda. This has been Horror Historian. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And down below, you can find my links to Twitter, which I'm not using quite as much, TikTok, which I am using much, and Ko-fi, which is where you can buy me a nice little drink. I would love a little frappuccino. But it's helping me out. I do have a job now again, so it's not as me pushing it. But if you do want to support the channel, I would appreciate it. April's movies I'm going to be making my list officially within the next couple days, and I will be posting it on my TikTok. I might post it to my community tab. So yeah, I think you're going to enjoy next month. I don't think I'm going to be doing a series though, because I think I'm going to be doing a longer series the following month, which will give me a little bit more time to finish that.